Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and in today's session, we're going to be continuing this series we've been going through on the Nexus Automation API, focusing today on the Nexus CMS section of the Automations API. Now, as always, of course, these webinars are recorded, so this entire series has been recorded. You can always go back and watch it in the series playlist. Also, as always, if you have questions and you're participating with us live, we encourage you to ask those questions in the questions window in GoToWebinar. We try to answer them live in line. We also save a big QA session for the end in case there's deeper questions about the series or about this particular session that you'd like to get answered. So certainly get your questions queued up and ready to go, or shoot them over when you're ready. Without further ado, we're going to jump in over here and take a look at today's topic. So, this whole thing starts out with, are you looking for a good way to keep your data within the Nexus environment organized? And today we're focusing on content, specifically content inside your libraries within the CMS. And so we're going to be using this API today within the Nexus Suite as kind of a secret weapon of sorts, kind of as a really powerful tool to go in and do a lot of things. And none of these are things we couldn't do manually. We're just going to automate it. Because those repetitive tasks within the normal portal environment, while I can do it for one-offs, really I want to have this be as automatic as possible. I want to go in there and take intentional steps and basically free up more time for other strategic BIM management tasks. So we're going to take a look today at how we can do things like tagging and organizing content in libraries and cleaning up old content that might be stale, and all of this. The goal here is to do this as automatically and painlessly as possible. So we're going to go through a few learning objectives. Normally I have 4, but today I've actually got 5. We're going to talk about getting base data, talking about content data specifically, so content files, whatever that might be, whether it's AutoCAD or PDFs or Revit content, you name it. We're going to get some base data for that. We're going to talk about cleaning up some old stuff, deleting some old file records. We are going to look at the structure for creating, updating, and deleting libraries, though I'm not going to actually do any of that demonstration today. We are going to create some tags and maybe delete some tags, do some updating of some tag information, take a look at how that can be really efficient and really fast. And we're going to do that based on some of the content data that we go fetch. And then finally, we'll talk about managing some tag and library associations, how you could automate the association of some of those created tags or created libraries with your actual content that's in your library. So where are we at here overall in this series? Just so we kind of recap this real quick. We kind of do this when we're in the middle of a series. So far, we've covered comprehensive introduction. This is the very first video. We talked 2 times ago in the using the Accounts API. Last session was about Projects API, and today we're talking about the CMS API, the last in our series. Now, before you can really take a big advantage of this, there's a couple of prerequisites that you need to make sure you have in place. And I've covered these before, but I always want to make sure this is fresh in your mind in case today sparks you to go do some of this. First off, of course, you have to be able to sign into the portal. ctcsoftware.com/portal. You have to be able to get there. You have to be using the Nexus Suite in some form to be able to do a lot of this automation. You will need an automation access key. Without that, you can't really do anything with the API. We talked in another series about reporting, how there's a reporting key, and that's a separate key you can get for that. The automations key is intentionally kept separate. There's one thing for looking at data. There's an entirely different thing for making changes to data. And some of the things we're going to talk about today, you'll understand why having a separate key for automation access is important, completely separate from the reporting key. And you can request that key at license_request@ctcsoftware.com. You can ask for that reporting key for the reporting side, or in this case, what we're talking about today, the automation access key for the automations side. You also will very likely want to establish yourself a Postman account. This Postman account is important because it allows you to navigate and see what all the calls are, what they expect, and what the data structure is that's going to come back, so you can plan for it. I've already done a lot of these things, but we'll show you some of these things in the Postman environment as well, so you can kind of see what it looks like there as you're working with this data set. And also a prerequisite before you do any real actual development is you should plan out what it is you're trying to automate. Think about some ideas. I want to try to do this more efficiently. Plan that out, what that looks like, plan out what the steps are that you do manually, and then you can automate those manual steps with more automatic steps because you're targeting something specific. The last thing you want to do is willy-nilly just go, hey, give me all the data, and then not know what to do with it. So plan out what you want to do with it. Now, about that getting of data, because it does start with getting some information, let's take a look at, well, getting some data. And there's some essentials we want to talk about here. First off, this entire system uses a REST API. The REST URL that we are using for this is api.ctcsoftware.com. We are automating some things. Specifically today, we're in the CMS kind of scope of area, and then we're in the version 1 of this whole thing, and we're doing some automation. Now, for this presentation, since I am actually making live changes to live data, I am going to be working in the Stage API. I'm doing this on purpose so that I don't affect my public data because I have other team members who are actually doing some production and customer-facing demos, and I don't want to screw them up with me deleting something or adding to a bunch of things that they are not expecting to see in their environment. So I'm doing this intentionally in a separate space so that I can just show you how this works without actually affecting my real production space. Now, there are specific routes within that URL for different actions. For example, there's contents or content, there's tags, there's libraries or tag and library. There's a few others that are there as well. And these are things that by using Postman, you'll be able to understand more about what those routes are. But every single one of these routes, to be able to access them, to get any data or push any data, it's going to require that organization access key that we talked about as a prerequisite. So we're going to be using that as we go through. I'll be showing the structure of a lot of these core and key items as we go through them. But, I just want to make sure that you understand that access key is going to be something that we're going to be passing almost every single time, actually every single time in the Automations API. So let's take a look at getting specifically some content data. And first off, we're going to be getting contents. This is plural. This is asking for a bunch of information. Now, for those of you who have leveraged the Nexus CMS, you're probably already aware of some of the functions that you can do. You can do things like adding a search query. You can filter for specific libraries. I'm actually opening up the Nexus CMS right now so we can kind of take a look at some of this stuff because this is important. And the concepts of what you can do in the graphic user interface, they're very similar to things that we can do in the API. So a query up here, I could search for something. I could go to my libraries and filter for any one or more libraries so I can check multiple boxes. I can filter for multiple tags. I can tell it only Revit content or Revit categories or display IDs. Like there's a lot of things that can be filtered to get a specific result. And you can do this, your users can do this, and the API can do this. So because this is much more complex, this isn't just a simple GET request like most of our previous portions in this series have been. This isn't just getting a simple thing where you're, checking a couple of boxes and a couple of parameters. It's way more involved than that. And so for this, it's actually a post request targeting contents. I'll show more in detail in just a moment here what this looks like, but it's a post request. You're sending something that's much bigger. Now, there are some input parameters that you have. In fact, I believe there's the access key that we're always going to be passing. So it knows that it's targeting your company and you're asking for data from your company. But then there's an entire body that can be put in here. And this body is in little curly braces here, the query, which page you're asking for, how many items you want returned on that page with a maximum of 100. If there's a search ID that you've already run and you want to get the second page from that search, you can ask for page 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And so this is going to give you a bunch of stuff or let you ask for a bunch of stuff. And let me show an example of this here. if I pull up my Postman environment and I go into the CMS Automation API here, and I go into Contents, and I go to Post, this search right here, notice how the parameters, there's only the one thing, the access key right here. So I can put in my corporate access key, which is being passed as a parameter since I'm using my CTC API here. But then over here in the body, you'll see a full set of all of the things that you could possibly pass if you wanted to the API. Now, what I can do here if I really want to is I can actually delete most of this. I'm going to choose not to actually pass most of these items. This would be similar to me just running a query here for something like everything and go, right? And I'm just going to let it pull back everything that I could possibly search with this. So in this case, if I don't have a search ID yet or a saved search ID that I want to use inside of here, I can pull this all out and just say, give me everything that is on page 1 and give me back 100 items on that page. Again, 100 is the maximum here. This is the most simplistic thing that I could possibly send. This will start asking for everything in my library. And when I send this, it's going to give me back a response here. It's going to say, well, this search was run and it has a special search ID. And it knows what page you're on by a page ID. And it tells you how many total items you have that are in the search and how many total items were displayed on this page. And it tells you then for each of the items, for each of these 100, it gives you some details about it, like what was the content ID and what is the content name, and what files are associated with that piece of content, and what organization that content is owned by. Like in my case, it's owned by me, or if it was coming from a public library, I could ask for stuff like that. Which libraries is that content in? So in case I wanted to do something with that, right? This gives you all of the same information you would get back if I was to run a search for everything in my native CMS and then go into the actual detail for the content, right? All of this detail that could show up here, that's all stuff that comes back as a part of that request when you send that search. And you got to figure out how to deal with some of that information, right? Because you want to get this and use it. So that response body that comes back here is going to be the contents response. And it's going to have a bunch of stuff. Again, search ID, it'll be a GUID. How many search items, actually it's supposed to be search items, not total items. I misspelled that or miswrote that. Then the item details, there's a bunch of other properties that show up here as well, right? So this is the response that's going to be coming back for you so that you can do something with this information in an automated way. That's the whole goal of an API, is to get just a bulk of data and then do something with that data. So in my Excel file that I've been using for our demonstrations so far here, on my CTC CMS tab that I wrote into this Excel file, I have the ability here to click Get Contents, and this will actually fill out and give me my CMS content. Now, I did this before we actually started this presentation today, and I did that on purpose because if I scroll down here to the bottom, you'll notice there's 5,390 actual data rows. Well, 5,391 rows, but the first row, the very top column here, is actually a header row. So there's 5,390 items in my list with all of their data and all of their organizations and categories, Revit categories and versions and data types and like where it's stored, if it's in the cloud or local, and all kinds of information about all of these files. And also, I've split that data out because there was that sub list of content files that are associated to this. And my content files tab here has, for every content ID, that some of those have multiple files that relate to those. And for this one here, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, there's 18,543 rows of data here. And then all of those components as well, well, they have libraries that they associate to, and they have tags that they associate to. And all of this information has already been fetched. So if I click Get Contents, it's going to take about 2 minutes for it to go through because it has to go ask for page 1 and find out that it has 5,300 items. And then it's going to go fetch page 2 and page 3 and page 4, 100 at a time, because that's what the API is limited to. And it's going to go through 54 different times to get that information and then fill out all of these tabs worth of data. I didn't want you to have to watch that or wait for that to happen. or risk it deciding in the middle of my presentation that it was going to take 4 times longer than normal, because that's what happens when you're on presentations, right? So I've already fetched that data. I'm not going to click this button to show you that it does the thing, because it does the thing, all right? So with that, once you get these files back, one of the data records inside this response body, and I found this very interesting, and I'm leveraging this pretty heavily here. If I scroll all the way back to the top on this file here, for example, precast slab hollow core side.rfa. This is a detail item. It's a 2-dimensional detail item family out of Revit. And it has automatically for it, or at least within my database right now, a 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24 version of this specific RFA that's available for a single piece of content. Now, maybe I want to go through the exercise of deleting a bunch of 2020 content. Now, I can do that. I can actually select a few of these. I'm just going to select these first 4 here because all of them happen to have a 2020 version that's associated to them. Or maybe I want to select all of my content and get rid of that. I've hard-coded into my button here, delete content files, so that I can clean up 2020 or 2019 stuff or 2018 stuff. I'm going through and being able to delete multiple versions of content, and these ones here only have one of those versions that I want to get rid of. But if I click delete content files here, it's going to run through and delete them. And eventually, after that delete happens, it's going to refresh just this one tab right here, and those will have been deleted. Now, I think it's probably going to disappear here, so I'm going to actually, well, we'll see if I can. I can't copy that. There's no way I can copy that now. I should have copied that ahead of time so I could have filtered for it and shown you this. I might do this one more time after this is done. We'll see. But it will delete that. But what it does also do is it sometimes resorts my list because the order in which some of these things come back, since my ask for data isn't filtering or sorting in a specific way, these come back sometimes in random orders just because of how I've asked for it. So you can delete content files, and the way that this delete content files works is the following. I just click the button. We're going to go through and actually take a look. This is a delete request specifically targeting the content endpoint. So if we jump back into Postman here, we are looking at the content collection here, and we're using the delete function for this, and it has some parameters and it has a body. So the parameters, the input parameters is, of course, the access key. We're always going to have access key as a parameter. That's going to be there. But it's also asking for the ID of the content record that you're trying to do a delete on. And then it's going to also request a body so that you can specify what the version year is you're going to be deleting. So this is actually built this way for future expansion, so you could potentially list in the future multiple version years, and it could go through and more easily delete those. So I had to, for each of those rows that I selected, pass to it the content ID for that row for the content, and then the version year that I wanted to delete. And for every version year I'm passing, I'm running it multiple times. So I'm saying delete version 19, delete version 18, delete version 20. And so then it goes through and deletes those, and it just does it all without me having to manually do that from the user interface. And eventually, what it should do is pop up with a statement saying, yep, I did the things, I am complete. And so it goes ahead and does that. And now it also reran the search for all this to give me back the latest set of data. And in this case, it returned the items in a different order because their validity was a little different than these ones just because of the available versions that were there. I think if I scroll down, well, quite a ways here, apparently, I could probably filter out all those that have 2020 and 21. That might be a good thing to do. So get rid of these ones here out of my list. The cool thing in Excel is that you can actually filter stuff out pretty quickly. In fact, I guess I could just go find the ones that had 21, 2, 3, and 4, because those would be in that list. And here we go. There's those few that I had selected with those IDs, right? Now they are missing their 2020 version because I've run through and deleted those. And I've done this step a few other times and deleted some other 2020 items. And so now I've only got 21 through 24 for a series of my content because that delete command just did that. So I can go through and clean up everything if I want to, deleting 2018, 19, 20, and just keeping the 21 and newer stuff if that's something that you're looking to do. I have a couple of customers looking to do stuff like that. So now you have the ability to do that. Now you can also do some similar things here for libraries. You can get libraries, you can get tags, and so let's take a look at the library here. There's a get request for the library. There's actually a get request for libraries, and I'm skipping that one in this case because that's just a basic get request. We've talked about this a number of times here. So if I jump back here into this, let's collapse this and this, let's go to libraries. The basic get request for libraries doesn't have a specialized body, it just has a series of parameters. So it's the access key. You can ask for, a specific filter for certain names of libraries, what page you want of this, what page size you want. So what I did is I basically said, give me 100 items. I don't have more than 100 libraries. None of us should have more than 100 libraries, but I asked for 100, and I asked for the first page, and I said, just give me everything, query everything on here. In fact, I even excluded that just so it asks for all of the things. And then when I hit send here to get this, it gives me all of the libraries with their base data. And the base items have most of the information that I want. But every once in a while, I want to go a little bit deeper. So if I grab this library right here by the ID, we're now digging into the get library request. And there's two input parameters for the get library request. Of course, there's the access key. And there's also a library ID field. And then what this will do is come back with some extra data here. The response body will look like this. It'll have an ID for the library telling you this is the ID you got back. And then it'll tell you the permissions for the groups and the permissions for users on that library. So that's what you get with the library details in particular. I'm not going to use that today, but that is something that you can do. You can actually ask for oh, I put project here. Oops, I misspelled that. Put the wrong data value. Let's go fix that real quick here. Library here. So when you go and get the response for the library, that's what we're actually talking about. It's this right here, ID, the GUID, the group permissions, the user permissions, that information comes back. So if I wanted to demonstrate that in the Postman environment, I have this ID here for one library, whatever it is. I don't remember what this one is. Its name is AutoCAD Civil 3D Content. Okay, so it's my Civil 3D Content library here. And if I go into the library get request, I can get data for that library, and it'll tell me any permission or content that's associated to it, or group permissions or discrete user permissions. It gives me this stuff. So I could use this to push data back into, or push the permissions or push the roles or push whatever I want back into the data set. Okay. So that is one of the automations you could choose to do, is automating your library permissions across the board. You can get what you have, you can change what you have as well. But what we're going to do here is leverage the create of a library. This is actually something that I find interesting, the ability to rapidly create or update values on specific libraries. And so this one here is a put request. We've talked about these before, the put request for a library. The input parameters for this is the access key. There is going to be a header here telling it that you're doing some JSON data. And then, of course, there is a body that you're going to put, which is, if you have it, the ID of the library to update an existing one. Then you can change the name, or you can change the description of that library. We've done this before with some other things like the creation of projects we did in our last session. It's effectively identical to that. The difference is what the body fields are that you need. And so if I wanted to create a library here, first off, I'm going to go ahead and get my libraries, which is the get request. So this will fetch for me and fill out my libraries tab. It also puts me on the libraries tab. And if I wanted to automate the creation of a library, maybe I put in like auto-new library 1 or something, and maybe I have description 1 or whatever, and then I can do some little Excel magic here to autofill that down and make an automatic new library 2, 3, and 4. Then I can create that library or update an existing library. And so what this will do is push those into the system using that create command, and then it asks for a refresh so I can get the actual IDs for that, and it tells me that it's complete. Now, if there was, so right here, there's those 4 libraries. I can also turn around and I can delete these libraries, right? So you can delete things. So maybe you wanted to go through and make a bunch of new libraries or make just a couple of libraries, but then later on you want to come back and mass delete a bunch and you don't want to do it through the graphic interface from the portal. Well, you can do that. It's a delete call to the library endpoint. There's some input parameters here, which is the access key. You're going to specifically tell it the library ID. But with this one, I wanted to call this one out because we've done deleting before, but this one's really important. I want you to be careful with this, right? You can delete a library, but if you're deleting a library and within that library there's content that isn't associated to any other library, then at midnight Central Time, all of that content that's completely unassociated gets deleted as well. So you want to make sure that you've updated that content that's in that library to associate to some other library, which you can do in an automatic way, but you want to make sure you have done that the way that you want before you actually just willy-nilly go through and delete a bunch of libraries. Because otherwise, you're going to be real upset with me when tomorrow you come into the office and you've got access to no content that you used to have access to before because you deleted all your libraries and you made a new one, but the content doesn't just magically know to associate to your new library. So the workflow that I recommend for you is make a new library, use the content library endpoint to actually update the associated library for specific pieces of content, all of it maybe, whatever you want, and then come back through after you're fairly confident with that and delete the libraries that you no longer want. The nice thing is you don't have to do those steps manually in the user interface of the CMS. You can do it all via code, and it can happen fairly quickly. You could click a button, make a new library, and then say, take all my content and reassociate it with this, and then come back around and delete the other libraries, and then you're good to go. So it can take you a couple of minutes instead of taking a couple of hours by doing it manually. But just do be careful, because there is a danger there that you could be deleting content from your system. And this, again, referencing back to what I had mentioned earlier, this is one of the reasons why I strongly recommend that you be careful of who gets access to your automations key, right? The reporting key, less danger. It's just data, it's just information. And some of you may have some sensitive data and information, but it's not quite as critical as people making changes to your structure of your company within these libraries here. So do be careful with this one. This one could be a little dangerous. Be careful also with the deleting of content, of course, but that one, at least you have to delete it version year by version year. You're not just willy-nilly deleting the entire piece of content, unless, of course, you write your command to do so. So now let's talk about tagging, managing tags. This is something that a lot of our customers have been waiting for. You've been wanting to be able to automate some stuff with tagging, and I'm going to show you a small, little simple workflow today that you can use with tagging. So with the tags first, let's just talk about the command structure. You can first get tag data by using a get request to tags. Actually, that should be tags, I believe. That's fine. There are some input parameters. There's the access key, of course. There is a query, so you can ask for some information similar to what it was for libraries. There's a page number and there's a page size. Now with tags, I expect some of you will have more than just one page of tags over time, especially if you're going to mass create a bunch of these. And so it will be important for you with that response body to understand that the total number of items you get back will matter, and you may have to paginate to the extra pages, page 2, page 3, page 4, with your request for the tags. When you do get the tags back, there will be an ID for the tags, there will be a name and a description, and then some other properties that exist there as well. So back over here in the Postman environment, if we were to go take a look at tags right here, get a list of tags, you can see there's a query, there's a page number, there's a page size, which I'm going to set mine here to 100. Go ahead and send this. It tells me, well, I got 40 tags back this time. With this particular request, there's a name, a description, there's an ID, there's a who added it and a who updated it last. Bit of information in here as well. But the most important stuff here is name and description and the ID for these things. And so in my Excel environment over here, if I do get tags, it'll drop me on the CMS tags tab, and you'll see I've got the ID, the name, the description for all of the tags that I currently have in the environment now in my current space. And I can go ahead and use this information with these IDs or with just building a bunch of new tags using the create update process here as I've done before. So an example with the create update here, it's a put request. We've done this before. There's some input parameters. There's an access key that you have to use for the put request. There's a header, and then there's a body that gets pushed. And for the body, it is an ID, which is optional if you're making a new tag. And then there's a name and a description if you're trying to update an existing tag. And so with this, if I wanted to leverage some of the data that I've already got, we'll go and do a little bit of back-end sort of black magic from all the cooking that's already been done here, do a little Betty Crocker action. I've already asked for my content, as I mentioned. I've already asked for my content files. I used one of the other endpoints that exists to give me back all of my content file properties. Now, this one is a little tricky here. Let me show my data real quick so you can understand why I didn't talk about this one in this particular session. My content file properties here has about 373,000 rows of data. This went and looked at my content, which then asked for my content files, which actually came back with a content record, and I expanded those out for 18,500 content files. This is all in my staging environment. Each of those content files on average has about 20 parameters with data associated to them. And so down here, my content file properties has 18.5 thousand times 20 gives me about 373,000 rows of data. This took my computer and my request approximately 45 minutes to fetch this data. I am not going to do this in the webinar today to actually fetch it, so I've already got it here. So with this data, I have this information, and it tells me what the file ID is, what the file name is, tells me who owns it, in my case, me, tells me the parameter names that are inside of those individual files and families and pieces of content and what those values are over here. Now, I'm going to use this information to my advantage. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to build a bunch of tags that relate to the manufacturer parameter. So I know inside of here there's parameters called manufacturer. There might be a few others that are sort of slant values for that too, but I was looking for all the values of manufacturer that are filled out, and I wanted all of the unique values. Well, Excel has this really cool ability where I can just write a simple little formula on a table of data. So equals unique, and I can give it some information here, give me the parameter name and parameter value column, and ready to go. And it'll give me all of that information back. Now I'm going to take this data because this is all still a part of a formula and it doesn't let me do a lot with that. I'm going to copy all of this data and I'm going to paste the values. So I've got every unique parameter name and value combination from this entire set of data here. And I'm going to take these two columns and tell it that I want to sort and filter it. It should be able to run that. Let's try this again. Sort and filter, please. There we go. So now what I want to do is I want to start by saying something along the lines of, hey, alphabetize all these parameter values over here. So it's all parameter values alphabetized. Filter it down for just the manufacturer. That's all I want in this little data set. This is now a list of unique manufacturer values stored across my entire library of 5,300 families and 18,500 family files. I can take this now and filter it down for things that I care about. One thing you probably notice is that as you pull stuff down from the internet, you're going to get different kind of formats. Even from the same manufacturer, they'll enter their data differently. So what I'm going to do is just filter down for the things that I actually care about. I don't care about my own content. I can ignore that one. I don't care about zero, whatever the heck that means. I don't care about it. So I'm going to grab just the individual values of unique things that I actually want. So Cooper Industries, maybe I'll keep all three of those values. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just get one of them and just keep Cooper as a whole and use that as one of my tags. CTC software, so even I'm not consistent, right? CAD Technology Center, CTC software, this is just different changes over the years. I'll take decor here, generic I don't care about, that one doesn't really matter. ICS content I don't care about, NA I don't, right? So I can just go through and You know, this guy has whatever that is, a registered trademark logo on it, and this one doesn't for the same manufacturer. This one puts Inc. and doesn't in other cases, right? So there's different variations that show up inside of here, and I'm just going to go get the true uniques of values that I want. This is the list of parameters that I actually want to have. So I'm going to copy this list, copy this straight out. I'm going to jump over to my content tags over here, and in the description, I'm going to paste it. So these are all of the unique manufacturer values that I want. I farmed this from a data set that I pulled using the API. And now I'm going to build myself some tag structure. You'll notice that here I have some specific structure for names that I like to use to group things together. This one, I'm going to do an M prefix for manufacturer. You could also put manu for whatever you wanted. It's your content. You can do whatever you want. But I'm going to do equals M dash in quotes, and then I'm going to put and use this field over here so that it basically builds me a list of all of the unique names that I pulled from my manufacturer's list prefixed with an M dash so I can keep stuff nice, neat, and clean. Now, I don't want these to all have formulas in them, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to do paste values. This is just an Excel thing to strip the formula away and keep the individual values here. I probably would do a little cleanup to do like title casing on some of these names so that I don't have all caps in one case and mixed case in others. But you can do whatever you want with this. This is your tag information. You can do whatever. And I'm also going to put here for a description, I'm going to put manufacturer tag just as a value inside of here for the description of this that I auto-generated. I'm just going to use that to copy it down. Now, for all of these rows, I want to build all of these tags. Normally, in the UI, it would be me making a new tag, typing out a name, clicking save. Making a new tag, typing out a name, clicking save, and adding the description consistently. And I'm air quoting that on my side. You can't see that, but, you know, quote, consistently adding these things. Here, I'm just going to say create or update these tags. And I'm going to let it think for a second as it calls the API, and it builds me all of those tags here in a matter of, well, minutes, seconds, actually. I'm going to sort A to Z here, the name column, just so that it actually gives me all of these sorted. Actually, sort it, please. You're going to sort. There we go. Did it do it? Oh, I guess I have ME in the mix here as well. So some of these are kind of being a little squirrely because I have an ME, mechanical equipment as a tag inside of here, and that's being a little squirrely. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, let's sort this A to Z. There we go. So now I have all my manufacturer tags all grouped together, right? So these are all the ones that I just built. Now you can use this for updating as well, because my create update tag lets me, if I have an ID, it'll pass it. So I can come back here if you're trying to reorganize some of this stuff, like all of my DI tags. Maybe I want them to all say discipline tag or something like that, right? So I can take this and autofill this down for all those discipline tags. Maybe these are all door tags and I want them all to say doors or something. In fact, this one somehow got an extra description here, so I'm just going to say door tags or whatever. Like, you can do whatever you want here, right? It's your data set. You can do anything you need. I can take all of these, I can create or update these tags, and what they will do is they will push into the system and refresh with all that data, right? So it completes, and now I've got, you know, consistent data for all of these pushed back into the system. You can very easily build out a bunch of tags and get their descriptions set up and very rapidly have these all ready to rock, okay? You can also take that information and delete tags that you no longer want, right? Like exercise equipment. I don't want this tag. There might be a few others like testing and Z auto group, auto upgrader. Like, those are 3 tags that I don't really want. So I'm just going to select those 3 and delete those 3 right from here, right from this Excel file. This should refresh and get rid of those. Yep, they're gone from the system. And it also then disassociated those tags from any content that used to have those tags, whatever that was, I just deleted it. So of course, be careful with this as well, right? So that delete, we've already talked about this with a number of the calls. The delete tag here has some input parameters. It's the access key and it's the tag ID, and that's it. So you're going to be passing those 2 parameters for each of the IDs you want to delete, and then it just runs the delete, and then they're gone. They're deleted from the system, and the back end handles all the disassociation. So let's step into a concept that's a little bit more involved here. This is one that I'm not going to demonstrate, but I will talk you through so you can see what you could do with this. We just went through the exercise of making some tags. We also have, potentially made some libraries. And you may want to take and assign those tags or those libraries to a bunch of content. So how does that work? Well, we're going to focus on just assigning tags, since I know probably many of you are going to want to do this as automatically as possible. This is a post command or a delete command if I'm going to be deleting the assigned tags. So this is assigning and unassigning both content tags and content libraries. And the difference here is it'll be either content-tags or content-libraries, and the structure of this will be pretty much identical. So the way that this works is there's two input parameters. There's an access key, as you will always have, and there's a content ID. So you're telling it, for this piece of content, either post to it some things or delete from it some things that are related to content tags or content libraries. When you're doing a post, or in this case, a delete command, there needs to be a header telling it that it's JSON. That's fine. And then in the body over here, you're going to give it a list of tag GUIDs, or if this was content libraries, library GUIDs. And it's just the GUIDs from those libraries. So if I was to do this inside of Postman, just to kind of give a quick example here, it would be if I go to content tags, that's what we were talking about, right? That's a post or a delete. In the post here, the parameters are access key and content ID. So I'd put a content ID here. And then if I had a whole list of tags that I wanted to add to it, to assign to it, in the body, I would give it all of those IDs. Just list them out. ID 1, ID 2, ID 3, ID 4 from my list of stuff that I've made, that I have. And if I wanted to, in reverse of that, remove any tags from a piece of content, I would use the delete command. And the structure is the same. Access key, content ID, and then in the body, a list of the GUIDs that I want to remove from a piece of content. And the content library for the associating of content to a library or the disassociation of content from a library is identical. You're going to be posting or deleting, and the parameters are access key and content ID, so it's exactly the same. And then a body of just a list of the, in this case, library IDs that I want to assign, or a list of library IDs that I would want to delete, right? So you can write some code behind that to automatically take and maybe delete all tags from all content. That would be pretty easy to do. And then turn around and reassign specific tags to certain content based on parameter values that are found in that content. You could do, maybe let it run. It's going to take a while to do this type of thing if you're touching every single piece of content after you've gotten, all these tag values. But you could have this run and just in the background based on a rule set, reassign tagging to your library based on, or just add to the assignment of tags or add to the assignment of libraries across your entire library based on the data types or certain properties of the content that you're looking at. There's a lot of automation. This is why earlier on I said plan out for what you'd want to do, because generally speaking, the properties that you want are there, and you can simply write some logic using whatever your coding language of preference is to have it run through the entire system and automate these types of things. Some of you I know have been wanting to create sort of your own archive of content. There's a file download option here as well. You can download the files. You could download the attachments that are associated to your files if you want to. You can get the data of what those file IDs and attachment IDs are from a content or a contents request. So there's a lot that you can get here and a lot that you can automate simply by looking at the Automation API and seeing what you can do. And generally, it's the same things that you can do directly from the graphic interface. It just is much more automatic and much more streamlined. And I like doing a lot of my editing from Excel now. It makes my life a whole heck of a lot easier. All right, so as to not get too long with this particular presentation, we're going to stop it here pretty quick. Just as a recap, where we are in the series, this session talked about using the CMS API, and this series actually is now done. We're done with the series. Any questions that you have, now is a fantastic time to throw them into the questions window. But for those of you who aren't going to hang out for the QA session here, I do want to say thank you. We always appreciate when you take a look at this on the YouTubes, when you participate with us live as well. And if you are watching this on YouTube and you found any of this series valuable, we do hope that you like it. In the YouTube space, that's obviously a good thing, and also that you subscribe to our channel so you can get updates like this in the future. That would be great.